Hello again, everybody. All right, we're going to play a little game today, a game of odds. So let me set up the scenario a little bit. You're about to fly somewhere. You're at the airport, you look out the window, and you see your flight, your plane, and it's a bit iffy. First of all, you hear the motors and they're sputtering, and that's not a good sign. And then the wings look a little off kilter, like there's some screws missing or something. And then you look into the cockpit and you can see your pilot, and he looks to be all of about 14 years old. So you're like, no, not for me. I'm going to go rebook my flight here. And as you're walking back, it's like straight out of the Twilight Zone. You're approached by a gentleman in a dark suit. And he says to you, if you get on that plane and you get to your destination, you will be given $10 million. But here's the catch. It's only a 50-50 chance you get there. The other 50%, you don't make it. I don't need to spell it out. Now, how many of you are taking that bet? 50-50, $10 million here, certain death over here. Yeah, nobody. Okay, maybe there's a couple of risk takers somewhere in the country who would do that, but most reasonable people, no way, 50-50 is not worth it. But everybody has a price point. Everybody has a pain point. What if I increased your odds of getting the money to 60-40, 70-30? How far do I have to go? If I get to 90-10, okay, I'm getting a few hands out here. You're willing to take the chance for only 10% death to get $10 million. But I bet you most of you, I've got to go significantly higher, 99.999, right? But everybody has their price. Let me tell you something. A lot of you are sitting right now on an investment portfolio that has more risk than you think. You think that your risk tolerance might be really small, and yet if I looked at your portfolio, it's a lot wider. So here's what I'm doing today. I'm taking that hypothetical little Twilight Zone story, and I'm moving it to the financial side to tell you some real-life examples that have greatly harmed people for the rest of their life in a drastic way, where they thought that they were all planned out financially for the rest of their lives, and they basically went to the poorhouse. I was referred to an older retired couple. Again, this is some time ago, because this friend thought that I could help them. Now, I'm not giving any names, of course, and I'm not even going to list the companies involved or the stocks, but this really did happen. So one thing that I noticed right away when I looked at this couple's portfolio is, and it was a sizable one, it was approaching 8 figures. Almost all of it, over 90% of it, was in one stock, one company. Now, you don't have to be a financial professional to know the risk that's associated with a portfolio like that. Now, there's a little bit of a catch here that you should understand. In this particular case, this couple had inherited this stock from the generation before, who had inherited the stock from the generation before. It went back 80 years from one small little company that had been bought out, then merged, then bought, and all of these iterations of this one particular company, now, when I looked at it, was this well-known, iconic, blue-chip stock. If I mentioned it, all of you would know about it. It's that large, very, very well known. It seemed on the surface that it would be very safe because it's been around a long time, and you would know it today. What are the odds of it going to zero? Using the airplane analogy, what are the odds of it crashing versus giving this couple that close to $10 million portfolio? I don't know, but they're not zero. There's nothing that's zero when it comes to investing in terms of the risk of something blowing up. So I implored them, you've got to diversify. There's no reason why you need to take that kind of risk. And they did agree. That's why we were talking. So I had put together a portfolio to diversify out their assets, keep it in the market, but spread out the risk to guarantee that they weren't going to crash and burn with their finances. They transferred their assets in and got cold feet. The emotion took over, which is never a good thing for investors. This stock had been in the family lineage for close to a century. and they were going to be the one to sell it over time. There was some angst that was going on here, and I totally got it. But I had to try to approach them from a reasonable factor to say, do you think that anyone from 80 years ago would really be that upset if you took good steward of this money and actually did something with it and reduced your risk? I don't think so. They just couldn't do it. So we had to part. I have a fiduciary responsibility here. I couldn't oversee this portfolio when if something bad happened to that one company, and here's something that's really important to this discussion. They were living off the dividends from all of this stock. That's what was supporting their lifestyle. If those dividends went away, they wouldn't have any money except a little bit of Social Security. That's what bothered me probably the most. So they went back. We parted as friends, and that was it. And I guarantee you all probably know where this story is going. Not a year later, that stock, actually that company, almost went under, almost went bankrupt. It was saved at the end. But here's a stock chart. That is the real stock chart, without me naming it, of what happened to that company in a short amount of time. It was saved. But for the purposes of this discussion, let me tell you what was the real damage here to this particular couple. It's one thing that the stock went down. That really wasn't impactful to them. It was the dividends. The dividend to try to save the company was cut to zero. They had no more income. Now, I don't know whatever happened to the couple, but I do know this, talking to this source, this referral, this friend, they never did sell the stock. I'm not sure what they did to survive financially, but that was a lesson learned. I already knew the lesson conceptually, but to see it play out. Now, I can almost guarantee that somebody watching this video right now, no, it may not be $8 to $10 million, but it's a significant part of your portfolio. Why are you taking that kind of risk? Please, it's okay to be boring. Boring is beautiful. You need to diversify. I understand you might have to pay tax, but that is a small price to pay to ensure that you will have money to the very end and the dividends that you need. Now, in their case, they had received, of course, a step up in cost basis. So if you were inheriting this stock, maybe the tax isn't as much, but that's a side discussion. Now, let me give you the other flip side of this coin, okay? If this describes you or somebody that you know, and you want to show them this little podcast here, know that there is an investment out there known as an exchange fund. I implore you to do your own research. I'm not going to go into it here. An exchange fund, there are only a few companies that run it, and it satisfies all the IRS codes. If you have a single stock, and it has to be a big blue chip name, if you've got a bunch of money in a small cap, it doesn't work. A big blue chip, iconic, well-known company, you can transfer or exchange it into basically something like the S&P 500 and defer the tax. So now this is great. Think about this. You have this huge amount of stock that you're afraid to sell for either paying taxes or you've got some emotional attachment, but somebody finally convinced you it's the right thing to do to reduce your risk for long-term planning. You take that big position, you move it through an exchange fund, which then diversifies it out all through the S&P 500, and you don't pay any tax on that at all, and you still have dividends. That also is a true story of somebody that I work with and still do to this day. Another blue chip iconic name that was starting to fall when we started to work with this particular client. We moved into an exchange fund, push the tax liability off. And do you know what happened to that stock? It also tanked, similarly to that first one. And she avoided disaster. If I told you these two names, you would know right before each of them tanked and crashed that nobody would have ever thought that that could have happened to these companies. So I don't care what stock you own. You can tell me of any well-known company, and I'm telling you, there is always a chance because of malfeasance, poor management, the industry that they reside in, could be hit, the overall market, whatever. There are no guarantees. And there's no such thing of the odds being zero that something bad can happen. There is no reason at all to take that kind of risk. I've seen it. I've lived it. So diversify and be boring, because it's okay to be boring. Boring gets you on a plane and gets you to your destination with as little risk as possible. I hope that helps. Now, if you haven't done so yet, talk about risk. A lot of people take risk with Social Security, believe it or not, and they play around with it. And they're given into all kinds of things that are actually not true. So go back last week if you haven't seen it, and please look at the podcast that I just did about Social Security and why you should not take it early at 62 if you don't have to, and also give that along to other people as well. And of course, hit subscribe. That keeps the channel moving quite along for some time. All right? Make it a good one. We'll talk to you again next week.